let me move on to, we're about 2 weeks away from the next debate. Tell me what you thought of the first one, and what do you think? I keep having this question about whether these debates are moving the needle, especially if Donald Trump's not there. So what are your impressions of the first one? What do you think about the impact the second one might have, if any?
There were mild implications from the first debate in which a couple of candidates, I think particularly Nikki Haley, maybe Vivek Ramaswamy, did themselves some good. DeSantis didn't move the needle one way or the other. I think he pretty much didn't hurt himself, but he didn't really help himself. Look, my bigger problem is I think the debates are a farce. I think they're a total disaster. I went to Chicago, appeared before the RNC debate committee. I shared with them, as a person who's gone through 2 cycles of presidential debates, that I think they need to take the debates away from TV networks who are not interested.
Yes.
No, I do, Sean. Take it away from them.
Yes.
Turned it into a game show.
And what did they say?
They in principle agreed, so they said, but then they kept it that way anyway. And I said, guys, you're being played.
Yes.
You're being played because I've also, in addition to being on the debate stage, I've worked at the networks. And I understand they're playing this for ratings and revenue. They don't give a rip how the debates really help or hurt the Republican Party candidates. They're going to do one thing, try to create a controversial environment that ultimately hurts Republicans, not helps. And let me give you some specifics. When an anchor spends 2.5 minutes asking a complex question and then says to the person who actually had the guts to run, you have 30 seconds to answer. That's nonsense. And when the moderators and the network control the clock, and so somebody that is willing to come out and say really controversial or confrontational things ends up getting most of the clock, and people with substantive things don't get any time because they're not boosting the ratings with controversy. See, I think everybody, and this is what I said you should do. First of all, don't have A and B tiers, and don't put people on the stage according to where they poll. Everybody draws position out of a hat before the debate. They don't know where they're going to be on the stage. And if you do have enough candidates that you have to do 2 stages, you don't have a so-called B table, the kiddie table as it's called, because that means it's over for those candidates. And then what you do, you give everybody exactly the same amount of time. Maybe it's 10 minutes per person. And when you speak, your clock runs. And at the end of 10 minutes, wherever you are, if it's in the first 30 minutes of the debate, but you've used your 10 minutes, you're done. Your mic's cut off. You don't get to come back in and say anything until the closing 1 minute. And that way, the time is equally distributed. The voters get a chance to really hear from all of these candidates and determine, do any of these guys really deserve more attention than I've been giving them? And you don't have a moderator. The questions aren't posed by a network anchor. The questions are posed by the candidates themselves. It's their debate. They're the ones running for office. If they wish to ask a question of another candidate, they can do that. But they control the topics. And why shouldn't they? They're the ones running for president. Why should we let news people, journalists and TV personalities determine even what the topics and questions are? I say we chunk the whole thing and start from scratch and actually have a Republican debate and not a television game show.
Yeah, there's a different strategy for a general election where you're trying to reach a broad audience.
Sure.
In the primary, I agree with you. The whole goal is to inform voters that are voting in Republican primaries and caucuses about issues that they care about, not what a TV anchor cares about, to your point, that's going to give them ratings. And I don't know why this is so hard to get across. They all nod, and then they'll say, okay, but let's talk about CNN next. And you're like, if you think that CNN is going to give us a fair, or NBC, and I'm telling you, there's a reason they haven't announced the Alabama debate partner, because they've run out of Fox entities to have it with. No knock against Fox. At some point, it's like Fox Nation's Nation is going to host a debate because they've run out. And CNN and NBC are next on the list. And that, to me, is an absolute political malpractice on the part of the party.
Couldn't agree more. And one of the reasons they claim is that, well, we don't have the resources for the staging. Let me tell you something, Sean. The American Republican voter They don't care about the staging. And secondly, don't tell me we couldn't get sponsors,
Right.
corporate people that would spend plenty of money to cover the production. But simply you would say, if you want to do it, and by the way, everyone can run the debate. It won't be limited to one network.
Feed.
Everyone will have
Right.
access to it. You can run it online. You can do C-SPAN, PBS. You can have every network, CNN, NBC, Fox, Newsmax. Everybody gets to run it. But here's the deal. You don't control it.
Right.
You run the debate as it happens, and the Republicans are running the debate because it is their debate. It is not the domain of a television network.
So you and I are simpatico on this thing. I think it's a travesty what's happening. I want to ask you, though, about the ultimate goal, which is winning delegates. And the first prize is Iowa, January 15th. You won Iowa. One, how important is it in the overall scheme of accumulating delegates and ultimately becoming the nominee? And number two is, I was out there at the state fair. I think Donald Trump's game plan and ground game from 2015 to now is vastly increased. But I was also impressed with what the DeSantis team has done. I know Nikki Haley's made some inroads. Vivek's made some inroads. It seems to me that, this is really a test of organizing. So based on your experience and your success, what sort of advice do you have for how we interpret Iowa and what should the candidates be focused on?
It is important to win Iowa. And if you don't win Iowa, you need to win New Hampshire or South Carolina. If you win all three, you're virtually unstoppable. That's just the way it plays. Right. To win Iowa, it's really like running for governor of Iowa. And it's a ground game, and it's a one-on-one game. It's not about really even big polling, big events. It's about connecting to people one-on-one in diners and in grocery stores and at small town home parties. And it's developing an organization of people who are willing to go out on a very cold, snowy night in January or February and drive on ice to go to a school cafeteria and be there for 3 or 4 hours and stand up in front of their neighbors and say, I'm going to vote for Mike Huckabee instead of Mitt Romney or whoever else is on the ballot. And if you're asking a lot of people, they don't just go and pop a vote in and they're out 5 minutes later. They're going to be there a while.
Yeah.
They may have to vote 2 or 3 times that night if their first person that they choose doesn't make it to the second ballot. Most people don't understand how the caucuses work. But when I won the caucuses, it transformed the trajectory of my race in 2008. I went on to win most of the Super Tuesday states, West Virginia and several other states prior to that. And it put me in contention in South Carolina, where I wasn't as strong before. But it came down to basically Charleston. John McCain barely beat me there. And had he not done so, and I won South Carolina, McCain had said he was going to drop out of the race because he was out of money. If I'd have won both Iowa and South Carolina, I would have been sitting pretty and almost, I'm not going to say I was be unstoppable, but I would have been in a very different place.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure you click the link below to find out more, or you can go to SeanSpicerShow.com to stay up to date on all my content.